It happens at 6:14 in the evening, right after the fork is set down and the plate is pushed an inch away from the edge of the table. And in that exact moment, somewhere behind your sternum, in a muscle roughly the size of your fist, your body begins running a program it almost never gets permission to run. You have eaten once today, just once, and your body, quietly, without asking your permission, without you feeling a single thing, is about to spend the next 20 hours doing something extraordinary with that single fact. Something so different from what happens on an ordinary grazing day that scientists who study it have compared it less to digestion and more to a factory shutting down its regular shift and quietly beginning an entirely different kind of work in the dark. Most people who eat this way have no idea what is actually unfolding inside them. They think they are simply skipping meals. What they are actually doing is handing their own biology something it almost never receives anymore in modern American life: silence. And in that silence, tonight, inside you, something is about to happen that even the people who first measured it in a lab had to double-check, because it did not look like deprivation at all. It looked like design. To understand what is coming, you first have to understand the world your body has been living in for most of your adult years, a world most of us never think to question because it has simply always been there. Coffee at 7, something small at 10, lunch at noon, maybe a coffee and a cookie around 3 when the afternoon starts to drag. Dinner at 6, a little something before bed because the evening felt long and the kitchen was right there. If this sounds like your day, you are not alone. This is the rhythm of nearly every American household, and it means your body may spend 16, even 18 hours out of every 24 in a low simmering state of digestion. Insulin rising and falling, like a tide that never fully goes out. Your body was built with the capacity for something different. It was built to experience real stretches of nothing, hours with no incoming food at all. And when that finally happens, even once, even for a single day, it responds the way a long idle engine responds when it is finally given the right fuel and the open road. It does not sputter. It comes alive. The first hour after your one meal today looks almost exactly like any other day, and this is where the story quietly begins, hidden in plain sight. Blood is redirected toward your stomach and intestines, nearly a quarter of your entire blood supply, in fact, temporarily rerouted toward digestion in a process sometimes called the digestive shunt. And your heart beats a touch faster to make sure your brain and muscles are still adequately supplied, even while so much blood is occupied elsewhere. This is ordinary. This has happened after every meal you have ever eaten. But behind the scenes, in an organ most people never think about at all, something different is already being set into motion, because your liver, sensing that this is the only delivery of food arriving today, begins packing away the sugar from that meal into a storage form called glycogen, the way a shopkeeper stocks the shelves before a long holiday closing, because your liver already knows something you have not consciously decided yet, that the next many hours are going to be quiet. By hour 4, your blood sugar has settled back down to its resting baseline, and here is where the paths genuinely diverge. On a grazing day, insulin would already be rising again, priming for the next small meal, the next cookie, the next reason to eat. But today, there is no more food coming, and so insulin keeps falling. And as it drops below a certain threshold, your body flips a switch that human beings possess, but in the modern eating pattern almost never get to use. It is the switch that says, stop asking the outside world for fuel and start using what you already have stored. Your body begins releasing fatty acids from fat cells into the bloodstream, and remarkably, your heart is the very first organ in your body to take advantage of this, because your heart muscle has always preferred fat as fuel, even on an ordinary day, drawing 60 to 70% of its everyday energy from fat already.
In other words, while the rest of your body is only just beginning to adjust to this new rhythm, your heart has, in a sense, been waiting for this exact moment its entire life. Somewhere between hour 8 and hour 10, a second, far more dramatic transformation begins, one that almost nobody has ever explained to the average person sitting on their couch tonight. Your liver starts converting some of those fatty acids into molecules called ketone bodies. You may have heard the word ketones attached to various eating trends over the years, but their relationship with the human body is far older and far stranger than any modern diet. Ketones are, gram for gram, a remarkably efficient fuel, requiring less oxygen than glucose to produce the same amount of usable energy inside a cell. Researchers studying the heart specifically have found something almost poetic here. Under conditions of stress, the human heart appears to instinctively reach for ketones as an emergency, high-efficiency fuel source, almost as though this fallback option has always been quietly wired into your biology, waiting for the rare occasion when it is actually needed. In a world of constant eating, insulin almost never drops low enough for long enough to let this fuel switch fully engage. Tonight, because you ate only once, your body may be reaching for a source of power it almost never gets permission to use. And this is only the first layer of what is happening inside you tonight. For anyone who wants to see the fuller picture, the way your daily eating rhythm touches not just your heart, but nearly every organ in your body, there is a complete companion guide called Body Hidden Signals, and the link to it is sitting in the pinned comment right now. If you happen to be watching this on your television, there is a QR code on the screen this very second that you can simply point your phone's camera at to open it instantly. It walks through this same territory, organ by organ, with the same care we are bringing to your body tonight.
Now we descend to hour 11, the point where the story takes its first genuine turn. As ketones climb and insulin sinks to its lowest point of the entire day, something happens to the electrical rhythm of your heart that seems at first glance almost backward. You might reasonably expect a heart running on stored fat instead of a steady drip of incoming sugar to show some sign of strain, perhaps a faster resting rate, perhaps a rougher, less even rhythm. Instead, researchers studying extended windows between meals have repeatedly observed the opposite, an increase in something called heart rate variability, the subtle, healthy variation in timing between each individual heartbeat, which reflects how well your nervous system is steering your heart moment to moment. A heart with strong variability is a flexible heart, quick to respond when demand rises, quick to settle when it does not. During these extended hours without food, your parasympathetic nervous system, the calming branch that governs rest rather than urgency, appears to gain the upper hand, easing your resting heart rate gently downward and your variability upward, as though your heart, freed for once from the repeated demand of processing food every few hours, is finally being allowed to exhale. This is precisely the territory where so many viewers over 50 will recognize something about their own lives without ever having understood why. That 2-3 o'clock slump, the heaviness pulling at your eyelids, the sudden gravitational pull of the couch, so often shows up on days built from small, frequent meals, when insulin has spent all morning rising sharply and falling sharply, leaving your blood sugar to dip right as your energy collapses along with it. And that 3 a.m. moment, wide awake, staring at the ceiling for no reason you can name. In some cases, researchers have connected this to a late evening snack causing an insulin spike, followed hours later by a rebound release of cortisol and adrenaline as your blood sugar swings back the other way. Hormones that are, unfortunately, extremely good at waking a sleeping person up. None of this means your body has been failing you. It means your body has been listening to you with total devotion, responding faithfully, meal after meal, year after year, to the exact rhythm you were giving it.
Eating once a day will not erase every pattern for every person, and it is not a promise or a fix. But many researchers studying meal timing have found that with fewer, more spaced meals, some of that afternoon volatility and some of that early morning hormonal noise does begin to quiet, simply because the insulin roller coaster has fewer hills left to climb.
By hour 14, roughly the length of time between an early dinner tonight and a later lunch tomorrow, your body crosses into what researchers somewhat clinically call the metabolic switch, the full transition from a system burning mostly glucose to one burning mostly fat and ketones. And here we find one of the quietly astonishing facts in this entire story. The muscle cells that make up your heart are almost never replaced across your lifetime. Most of the ones you have today were already present in some form when you were a small child, which is part of why damage to the heart carries such weight. There are very few reserves waiting in the wings. But those same irreplaceable cells are extraordinarily skilled at something called autophagy, a word that literally translates to self-eating, in which a cell identifies its own worn-out internal components, misfolded proteins, sluggish little energy factories called mitochondria, accumulated cellular debris, and methodically breaks them down and recycles the raw materials into fresh, working parts. This process runs at some low level all the time, but research on extended time between meals has repeatedly shown that autophagy accelerates significantly once insulin drops low enough and stays there long enough, typically somewhere in this 13 to 16-hour window. For a heart made of cells that must serve you an entire lifetime with almost no replacements ever arriving, this daily maintenance may be one of the most important things happening anywhere in your body. An invisible crew working the night shift, quietly restoring the oldest, most irreplaceable rooms in the house, while the rest of you goes on with your evening, completely unaware. Consider for a moment the sheer scale of what your heart is actually doing while all of this unfolds, because a number this large can slip past you if you let it. Somewhere around 100,000 times today, your heart contracted. Roughly 2,000 gallons of blood moved through it, enough to fill a small backyard swimming pool, pushed through nearly 60,000 miles of blood vessels, a distance that would wrap around the entire Earth more than twice. And every bit of it happened without you consciously directing a single beat, while you answered emails, walked around the block, or sat through a meeting that felt far longer than the clock said it was. And every one of those 100,000 beats today was shaped in some small way by whether you ate once or 6 times, by how much insulin was circulating in your blood, by whether your heart was burning sugar or fat, by how much rest your nervous system was permitted to hand it between demands. Your heart does not know your calendar or your intentions. It only knows your chemistry, moment by moment. And tonight, your chemistry is different than it usually is.
There is a second character in this story who deserves attention here, and that is your blood pressure. And its role in this drama is not simple, because it does not move in only one direction. In the earlier hours of eating less frequently, many people experience a modest, welcome dip in blood pressure, connected partly to lower circulating insulin, which, in its chronically elevated form, can encourage the kidneys to hold on to more sodium and water than the body actually needs, nudging blood pressure quietly upward over months and years without anyone noticing until a checkup reveals it. When insulin drops for extended stretches, some of that retained fluid is released, and blood pressure eases. One reason some people describe feeling lighter, less puffy, more clear-headed on days built around a longer stretch between meals. But responsible storytelling requires the rest of this picture too. That same shift in fluid and sodium can, in some individuals, particularly those already taking blood pressure medication, push things down further than intended, sometimes causing lightheadedness upon standing up too quickly, a phenomenon doctors call orthostatic hypotension. This is precisely why physicians who study fasting patterns in older adults consistently stress that anyone taking blood pressure or heart medication should never change their eating pattern without looping in their doctor first, because the very shift that helps one heart can destabilize another if medications are not adjusted alongside it. Your heart is not reading a script that applies identically to everyone watching tonight. It is responding to the particular chemistry of the particular body it lives in, which is exactly why wonder, however real, is never a substitute for the judgment of the physician who actually knows you. From here, we move deeper still, past hour 16, into territory that touches something almost every one of you has heard mentioned at a doctor's visit at some point without fully understanding what it meant: inflammation. Not the kind you feel after twisting an ankle, but a slow, low-grade, largely invisible kind running quietly through your bloodstream. One that cardiologists now understand as a central driver of atherosclerosis, the decades-long process in which fatty deposits called plaques gradually build along the inner walls of your arteries, narrowing the very channels your blood depends on to keep every part of you supplied. Markers of this inflammation, such as C-reactive protein, have been observed across multiple studies to decrease with sustained patterns of longer stretches between meals, and researchers believe part of the reason involves the immune cells patrolling your bloodstream. When they are not being constantly called upon to manage the aftermath of frequent eating, some evidence suggests they settle into a calmer, more even baseline. This does not mean one day of eating once dissolves plaque that took 30 years to build. It means that meal pattern after meal pattern, your arteries may be living inside a slightly calmer internal climate, fewer storms rolling through, more clear, quiet days. And cardiologists believe that over years, that difference in daily weather can genuinely shape the landscape of your entire cardiovascular system.
There is one more layer still, and it may be the one that lands closest to home for anyone who has quietly wondered somewhere around their 50th or 60th birthday whether the stairs really have grown steeper or whether it is only in their head. Mitochondria, the microscopic power plants living inside every cell of your body, including the trillions inside your heart muscle, naturally decline in both number and efficiency as the years pass, producing less usable energy per cell than they once did, which is part of why fatigue can settle in even when nothing is technically wrong with you. But researchers studying extended windows between meals have found that the very same autophagy process clearing out damaged cellular debris also appears to stimulate something called mitochondrial biogenesis, the creation of fresh new mitochondria to replace the ones just cleared away. In other words, these hours without further food are not simply a pause. They may be quietly commissioning a renovation crew inside your own heart. Old, worn machinery hauled out, new machinery installed, on a rolling schedule that continues as long as your body is given the quiet hours it needs to complete the work. This is not a reversal of aging, and no honest account of the science would ever claim that it is, but it is a real, measurable form of renewal happening at the cellular level inside the one organ that has never once, in your entire life, taken a single day off. As your day without further food stretches toward its 18th, 20th hour, your body has completed an entire hidden itinerary that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with intelligent, adaptive design. Fuel shifting from sugar to fat to ketones, a nervous system leaning toward calm instead of urgency, a maintenance crew of autophagy sweeping through cells that must last a lifetime, mitochondria quietly being rebuilt, inflammation gradually settling, blood pressure easing in most, though not all, of the people experiencing it. Each event triggering the next, none of it visible, none of it asking for your attention,
all of it converging on a single outcome, a heart that, given the chance, appears to know remarkably well how to take care of itself. None of this means eating once a day is the correct pattern for every person in every body watching tonight, and none of it should be mistaken for medical advice tailored specifically to you. Existing heart conditions, medications, diabetes, and individual history all shape whether an eating pattern like this is appropriate, and that determination belongs to you and your physician, not to a documentary, however genuine the wonder in it may be. What this journey does offer is something perhaps more valuable than a single verdict, proof that your body is not a passive machine simply absorbing whatever is handed to it, but an active, listening, translating system, converting the rhythm of your days into the chemistry of your cells every single hour, whether you eat once or 6 times, whether you ever notice or not.
So consider tonight that steep flight of stairs, that 3 a.m. stretch of staring at the ceiling, that 2 o'clock heaviness behind your eyes, not as evidence of a body giving up on you, but as a body that has been narrating its experience to you the entire time in the only language available to it, sensation. The heaviness was insulin telling a story about a meal from 3 hours earlier. The waking at 3 was hormones quietly balancing a ledger you never saw them keeping. And the strange, clean lightness some people describe on a day of eating only once, the sharper focus, the steadier mood, the sense of an engine finally running the way it was built to run, may be your heart, for a few uninterrupted hours, finally getting to do exactly what it has always been capable of: rest, repair, and choose with remarkable intelligence precisely the fuel it needs. It is never too late for your heart to respond to a new rhythm. Research involving adults well into their 60s and 70s has continued to show measurable metabolic and cardiovascular shifts tied to meal timing, a reminder that this organ, having beaten faithfully for 6, 7, 8 decades of your life, has not lost its capacity to adapt. It has simply been waiting for a different set of instructions to arrive. What we traveled through today is one part of a much larger story, a body that has been speaking to you every single day in a language most of us were never taught to read. The full Body Hidden Signals Guide is the map of that language. The link rests in the pinned comment below. And for those of you watching on the television right now, the QR code on your screen will take you straight there. 40 signals, 40 explanations. Everything your body has been trying to tell you, waiting patiently, faithfully in the quiet hours between meals for you to finally start listening.